Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 7th Product Analytics Group Sync. Got a pretty good agenda today, but given the intimate nature, we can skip the billboard review and just do a quick little synchronous stand-up. I'm happy to start. So this week, I'm largely focused on talent assessments. That's got a pretty strict timeline that we need to get all of that sorted by in terms of manager evaluations and the cross stage and organizational kind of calibration stuff. So that's my primary focus. But beyond that, last week you might have seen the logging dashboard I put together. So that was kind of just a proof of concept to say, hey, like we can get metrics shipped. We have logs going in as well from all the different clusters, but we still need to connect all of the different other metrics from at the application level, in addition to just Kubernetes health metrics, and able to have in order to have just a complete inventory of like here's all the things that we're tracking as far as health metrics to be able to then start to build dashboards on, what is the relation between resource usage and application metrics. Is vector arraying out? Is there a correlation between that and all the other services? So we can kind of start to figure that out. Because the next step after that would be, how do we set alerts based on that? So we have some automated procedure to really act on service disruptions before they get worse, or and basically just try to solve them other than getting alerts when it's a little too late, perhaps. Beyond that, I'm also just working on creating a bunch of issues surrounding that, but also trying to push some discussions forward around like backup strategy, a couple around like custom events, and then there was one that can't remember. It was anyways, I'm just trying to put some discussion forward. So you might see some things from me. So thanks for dealing with that. But that's my week in a nutshell. Who wants to go next?
I can go. So my focus has been continuing on the usage quota page for product analytics. Some good progress there. Basically down to the last merge request now that I'd like to get merged before we flip the feature flag. That's a maintainer review, and that's that empty state kind of dealing with product analytics being disabled. That side of things. So yeah, good progress there. The other thing I would call out is the wrapper type hints in product analytics code. So this was a change to our unit tests in the front end, taking advantage of some type hints that were added into the code base. So it just gives us a nicer environment when we're working with tests. So yeah, that's been added throughout all of the product analytics code. Yeah, that's me.
Also must be me. This week, let's see. Hoping to start some scoping with our friends in finance around the SKU and the flow for provisioning the access to the product analytics stack. Creating a demo with the CSM or for the CSM team with some of the newer things that have been released, custom events in the table, to try to drum up some interest there. And then a couple of things with Dennis and nailing down criteria around our AI experiments and evaluation of those for OKR for the quarter. But great work, everyone, on the Think Big, Think Small the last couple of weeks. And we started turning those discussions into issues. So keep working on that as we go through. And that's it for me. It looks like I've got the first item here. I wanted to include follow-up around the pre-aggregation discussion that had started either in the last call or in an issue. I don't recall which exactly.
Yeah, there's a last call with Rob announcing
okay.
that we can support pre-aggregations, but yeah, wasn't sure about the details about that.
Max had pinged me about that in an issue is what it was, and I think 6 hours is what we have settled on. So the result of that is that data may not be super fresh, but within 6 hours it gets aggregated up. So for super large projects like GitLab, you might be looking at slightly older data, but it'll be a lot more performant when you go to query.
All right.
So I can start. So my question in the agenda is 6 hours the right time frame for these? Should we go shorter? Should we go longer? And I'll start voicing over not on the call comments here. So Rob said for analytics products that aren't doing real time, it's pretty common to have a 24-hour post-processing delay. You'd have to be upfront that it isn't real time. 24 hours might be too long. Also, Rob, obviously the quicker we render new events, the nicer the UX, especially when you're first setting up your project. It's useful to be able to see events come in to prove it works. And I totally agreed. And maybe we can have near real-time events for a small subset, like the last 10 events, or something just as small. So some options there. Dennis, it looks like the next couple of comments are yours.
Yeah, so I think just so I'm familiar and anyone kind of catching up with the conversation, I was just kind of curious how we kind of landed on 6 hours. Was there any kind of did we measure any performance or impact based on like being able to refresh those pre-aggregations that helped us land at six, or like what was I guess what's the methodology or thinking behind 6 hours? Just so maybe my subsequent points may not be valid.
Oh, no worries. I went with the couple of options that Max said. I initially I was thinking about the wrong aggregation level. And so said, let's do a week. That's way too long to wait for data though. It said 6 or 12 hours. Like, we'll take the shorter of the two, but maybe we go shorter than 6 and go 2 or
Yeah.
4, right?
Yeah, so my main point is I think it'd be really useful to understand the impact in terms of like the resourcing and generally the cost of like what what does it take on the cube service side of things in addition to how does it affect ClickHouse Cloud? Because I think we should strive for as low as possible. I think 24 hours is a that's a long time to start. And I think that's like the lowest bar, right? We can achieve. I think we can do better than that. Or if anything, we can kind of figure out how much more would it cost to be able to support 12 or 6 hours or hourly. If we can get to the point where by default, Cube actually sets its refresh rate for pre-aggregations at an hour. So I think one, it's going to be important to understand. My understanding, because it's a single cube schema, is that it will work for all projects. So it's not like refreshing on a project by project basis. So if we can understand at the .com level how much that costs us in terms of resourcing, then we can kind of make that decision of like, okay, I think hourly actually makes sense, or we can do 15 minutes even, or like, whatever we think, like let's try to bring it in as much as possible.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be very expensive or it takes up a ton of memory and it starts to affect, the ingestion of events from ClickHouse, which I don't think it would, then, we can kind of slow that down. And depending on, so like, I guess the long story of that is like, let's get some data behind what we can actually do and try to push it as much as possible. Because we are kind of working with kind of, we are underutilizing resources. So I think we have some headroom to really bring that down, even from 6 hours. And then on top of that, like that'll help. Like I think once we have a decision there, then we can figure out, well, what's our solution for real time? Because if we're already refreshing hourly, then we only need to show real time for like the last hour. Or if we can only do 24 hours, and how do we show real time for like the last day? Just to kind of point out an example, if you've ever used Google Analytics, they have a real time dashboard, so we can just create a real time built-in dashboard which only supports whatever time frame we set there. So that way that satisfies that whole, is my instrumentation working? And then we can provide kind of like a workaround or a stopgap solution for, here's how we can support week over week, month over month querying, and this takes X hours to refresh, versus, here's what you can look at to see, like if you really want to know how something's performing with your product launch, feature launch, or just to see if it's working, here's the dashboard for that. So I think I've covered all my points there, but I'm curious what y'all think about that strategy.
I like that because it allows us to move forward with things like feature flags or experimentation potentially later, where I don't want to wait or couldn't wait an hour for the data to flow through even. I need to know like right now.
Yeah.
And then aggregating for later data sets. I think that makes a lot of sense. So then what kind of experimentation, what kind of next steps are there to get some confidence in cost for these different levels? How do we want to go about getting that data, and then what's our criteria for making a decision on those?
Yeah, so I think the first step would be, and I I should remember this, but I think I pinged Halil, Max, and Rob on this already. Of like, I think any of them can start to go in to see, run a refresh and just see what resourcing changes on that. I think you can see that easily on the GCP console. And then you can actually look in the ClickHouse side of things, or I can help, or Max can help as well, in terms of actually seeing how much memory was used to actually perform that refresh. So that one, let's gather the data, and then honestly, we can just experiment with it too. Let's just start with hourly and see how it goes. But at least we can use that and know that this is going to be the cost every hour. and combined with how we're monitoring our metrics and logging to see if that actually affects like event ingestion at all. Because if we're able to comfortably accommodate, 20 million events a day for .com, I think we can say that, right? Or I might have to hide that recording. um, but if we are able to handle .com scale, then we should be comfortably able to handle that at like an hourly basis, unless we see some major issue. Like I think that'll cover us up to GA at least, and still get all the benefits of like much faster dashboard performance for everything else.
Cool. I think I have the next steps captured. My only ask would be, let's try to do that at the same time, roughly, so that we can start to get, hey, how much are we aggregating? Is it going to be 2 million events versus 20 million events? Like if we're doing it at different times, or if there's other ways to control for that, just to make sure that our numbers are really, matching up as much as we can. And the variable is how long was the pre-aggregation?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing worth noting too that I'm sure Max would bring up is in the same way we've been optimizing sessions, for example, by aggregating as the events get inserted, as we can do something similar to help reduce the overall load in terms of how much we have to crunch when we refresh our pre-aggregations. But we'll evaluate that when it becomes necessary. But yeah, I'll leave it to anyone if they want, but Halil, Max, and Rob, who were on part of that conversation, to create an issue on that, go ahead and assign it to the milestone. I think we should try to address that as quickly as possible as far as gathering that data. That way we can move forward with implementing the pre-aggregation and seeing how that actually helps us improve the performance there.
Yep, 100%. Let's pull that into, I think it'll be 16.7 is the milestone kicking off in not too long.
Because it starts basically end of this week, right?
So
yeah. So
calendar math is even harder when the milestone date moves.
Yep.
Cool. Ellen, that was kind of a conversation between Dennis and I. Anything you want to add there?
Not really. It seems like a good approach. I guess the only thing would be if we are moving that number around, we just have to be clear what we're telling customers so they don't get a shock if it goes up. I guess we've got a bit of leeway because we're an experiment, but it could be, if that's a key requirement for someone to have some level of real-time data, then don't want to move that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up actually, because I believe Cube does tell us when it was last refreshed. So we could proxy that forward so that when users are looking at that dashboard, we can do something I've done in the past was data last refreshed, and it was the timestamp of like when the last pre-aggregation was, or whatever metaphor for that caching layer was performed. So yeah, that's something we should try to make as transparent as possible. And then we can document that as well in terms of like, here's for which dashboards, or here's by default how often we refresh these things.
Cool. Okay. So moving on in the agenda, just thanks again, everyone, for the great Think Big, Think Small sessions. Links to the recordings and the docs are there, and I've started to create issues from those in a specific epic. Feel free to add or edit the existing issues that are there. I haven't completely rewatched the sessions. I will at some point this week yet, and try to capture everything that maybe we missed in notes, but primarily it's been driven off of what I've read in docs so far. And then I've linked back in the docs to the issues that have been created or issues that already existed from prior brainstorming. Cool. Dennis, moving on to you for meeting time and calendar wrangling.
Yeah, so unfortunately we weren't able to get Graham in here due to some scheduling conflicts. So I just wanted to double check with everyone to make sure if we push this meeting by about an hour and a half, it seems like we've got space on everyone's calendar, but I just wanted to get a quick check from y'all, Ellen and James, to make sure that's okay with you all before I just go ahead and move it.
Yeah,
that
works for me.
Awesome.
It
cool.
saves some super early mornings when our daylight savings line up just so yeah, it works well for me.
Awesome. Cool. Then we can go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and update that accordingly. Cool. I think that's it. Um, yeah, there's show and tell and final topics. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
Nothing here.
All right. Then 15 minutes back. It's good to see you all, and have a good rest of your Tuesday, rest of your week. Catch you in the next one.
You do? Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.